not Jedi. So what are you?
We are Sith. We can help you reclaim Mandalore.
Sith are no better than Jedi. They claim to be powerful, but we put these two back together after the Jedi gutted them.
Our combined strength will be rewarded. Mandalore will be yours. And Kenobi, this Sith pretender Dooku, and all our enemies will fall. For Mandalore!
Remember, there can only be two. And you are no longer my apprentice. You have become a rival!
Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Aaron, or LM9, and today I have finally finished all 5 figures for part 2 of my custom LEGO minifigures from Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now, I am extremely proud of each one of these, and I think together as a group, they are collectively my best work to date, so hopefully you guys like them just as much as I do. So in this video, we'll be taking a look at Vizsla, Savage Opress, Darth Sidious, Darth Maul, and Bo-Katan. So, let's get to it. So we're going to start things off with my new version of Darth Maul. Now, this outfit for Maul is quite possibly my favorite look for him just in any Star Wars media, so I was very, very excited to finally be able to make this figure. So starting off with his lightsaber, I built this hilt from scratch using a Big Kid Bricks hilt switch, a Lego harpoon piece, and a Lego hilt for the emitter. Now, there's also a little magnet at the bottom, which is used to attach the second half of his hilt that he uses in Season 7, but honestly, I kind of prefer the look of the single blade since he uses this the majority of the series, but you know, it is nice to have that option to display him with the double blade, so I figured you guys would want to see that. Now, moving on to the figure, there's a ton of stuff to go over. On the legs, I sculpted the knee pads, the joints on the sides, and the pockets on the thighs. The bottom half of the legs were painted in various metallic colors since they are the exposed metal and steel sections of his robot legs, and the upper half was painted in this tannish gray jumpsuit color. Now, the color of the jumpsuit, or the undersuit, whatever you want to call it, has always been something controversial since people always make this version of Maul with either like a gray, a tan, or sometimes even a red undersuit. However, if you look at Maul in bright white light in the show, it definitely has a light gray base. At least that's what I see. My friend Will even put it to a vote on his Instagram to see what other people thought, and it seemed like the majority kind of agreed with me.
I love democracy.
But anyway, on the torso, he has the exposed chest with the tattoos painted on and the dark gray cloth robes covering them that go down a little bit below his belt. And then he also has that intricate belt that was made using some cloth and some vinyl material, which looks really nice. The arms have the shoulders sculpted on, and then I use electrical tape for the gauntlets. And he also has some tiny tactical glove tops to fill the gap. Now, the head on this guy was obviously the trickiest part, but it turned out literally just the way I wanted it to. It's just the way I visioned it, and I couldn't be happier with this thing. So what I did is I used a polybag Maul head as a base. I sculpted the top of the head, and then I dry sculpted each individual horn. And after all of those horns were dry, I cut them up, glued them on, and then I reshaped them using either more sculpting material or sanded them to be a little sharper, and I think they turned out perfect. I think they are the perfect size for this, and I could not be happier with those. So after that, I just painted everything on the head, but I had a little bit of a guide here since I was using a Maul head as a base. I was able to kind of just trace around the tattoos and just repaint them basically. And then I also had to repaint the eyes to make them a little further apart since they are kind of close together on a Lego head. So I think that turned out really nice. And I also just did add his ear piercing on the side there just as a nice little detail. Now, for the sake of comparison, here is Maul next to my first Maul figure from the Phantom Menace project that I did a couple years ago. Just so you can see how I've improved on making the horns on Maul's species, or the Zabrak. Now, just for fun, here's this new head on the old Phantom Menace body, just to get a look at what an updated version of that figure would look like. And then one little comparison, here is Maul with his arch enemy, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Next up is Maul's brother, Savage Opress. Now this guy is a beefcake of a minifigure. Savage is a huge dude in the show, so I had to figure out some way to capture his size in a Lego figure without making him look, not entirely Lego. I know some people don't like my figures just because they're too detailed, but I wanted to make him a little bigger than your normal Lego figure. So what I did is I took a torso that my friend Andy actually gave me a few years ago, which had the shoulders broadened and the waist extended downward a little bit. I modified that a little bit and then extended the arms and the legs to match the proportions of that torso in order to get the right size for Savage. After that, I sculpted the armor on the legs and the torso, and man, that shoulder armor was giving me a rough time. That was not fun to do. I don't know why. It was just something about that. It was just really making me mad working on that. But after that, I made a robot arm for him that has articulation in the wrist and at the shoulder using some magnets there, so it works just like a normal Lego arm. And I did use a Lego droid arm as a base and then kind of extended it in some areas and sculpted a little more detail on it. And then I ended up using some cloth for his various skirts and his belts, as well as the wraps around his arm, and then painted everything up. His other arm does have some armor sculpted on to the wrist and then kind of the bicep area, which looks pretty nice. Now, moving on to the head, the process of making this was just like Maul's, where I dry sculpted each horn and attached them individually, making sure I got the right shape of his busted horns as well. But unlike Maul, I didn't have a guide for the face. I wasn't using a Savage head as a base, because, the only one out there is the Clone Wars one, and that looks goofy. So I just used a normal yellow Lego head as a base, and I started off by just painting the mouth first, so I had a anchor point of reference, and just went from there. And I painted everything else, and I'm really, really satisfied with how this head turned out. The last thing is his lightsaber, which was entirely scratch-built by me using some various Lego bits, such as some stuff from some hilts, and then also, just some sculpt here and there. Now, just to see how big this guy is, here he is with Maul and with Obi-Wan. So he definitely is a tall guy. So I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. Finishing up the trend of dark side force wielders, here is Darth Sidious. Now, initially, I planned on making Gar Saxon instead of Sidious, but I figured good old Palpatine fit in better with this group of figures, and I was also getting really burnt out on doing Mando sculpts and just sculpt heavy figures in general. So, Gar Saxon will be in part 3, since I'm mainly just going to be painting figures for that part, not really sculpt heavy, so I'll be able to include him there just to spice that up a little bit. So he is coming, so do not worry. Anyway, back to Sidious. This guy is fairly simple compared to the other 4 figures in this part, which is kind of why I wanted to do him, because I knew he would be fairly easy. So on the figure, I used some vinyl and some cloth for his purple robes and his belt, and then I used some vinyl for his main red robes. Now, on both sections of the robes, I tried to paint as much detail as I could, since, those reference pictures I was looking at were pretty dark, since it's all during his fight on Mandalore, which is at night, so it's kind of hard to see everything, but I made sure to include some stitching on that purple section, and then also some nice wrinkles on the red areas. Now, the upper cloth section was made using some Stormtrooper pauldrons that were cut up a little bit and then painted up. He also does have a gold clasp sculpted right up there. His arms also do have some baggy sleeves sculpted on, since he has these really tight wraps around his wrists, so I think that sculpt turned out really nice. His face is just the normal Palpatine face, but the hood is a whole other story. This started off as a normal Lego hood, and I took a Dremel to it to thin out a lot of areas and reshape it, and once I did that, I resculpted the entire front end to make it drop over his forehead at a sharper angle, and then also cast a shadow over the eyes like he has in the show. And then I also resculpted the little bottom areas to make it lay a little better, and so there's no gaps between the hood and those little cloth bits. And then last thing I did is I made his pair of sabers. This design was inspired by Benson Bone Sidious sabers, which you can find on his Instagram, and he does have a breakdown for it if you guys are wanting to make those. I think they look so much better than my version from Revenge of the Sith. And speaking of Revenge of the Sith, here is my new Sidious compared to my first version of him from Revenge of the Sith. And then here's a look at my other Palpatine figures so you guys can see the progression here. And then here he is with Maul and Savage, and we'll throw one in here with him and Dooku. Vizsla has been on my bucket list of figures that I've been really wanting to make, I think for like 5 years now. And I'm kind of glad I waited, because I'm not sure if I would have been able to make him 5 years ago with my sculpting talents then. I've definitely progressed as a sculptor recently, so I'm really happy that I waited because I'm really, really happy with how this guy turned out. Now, if you guys didn't see the base sculpt that I posted a little while ago, here's a look at that, just so you guys can see everything that I added onto this guy. Starting off with the legs, he has the shins, the knees, and the thigh armor sculpted on, and then I painted it up in various grays and metallic colors, and I do have a black jumpsuit painted on there. The torso has the chest armor sculpted on, a vinyl cod piece, and a cloth and vinyl belt with some pouches on there. The chest armor has what looks to be like a similar symbol to the Mythosaur skull. I know that's not exactly what it is, but it looks pretty close. Again, not exactly sure, so if anybody knows, please let me know down in the comments. But I also really do like how the paint on the belt turned out. I think that looks pretty clean, and something so satisfying about looking at that. Now, the arms have the shoulders and the gauntlets sculpted on, and then they were painted up, again, using some grays and some metallics, and the gauntlets do have some little buttons painted on there as well. Now, if we take a look at the back, I sculpted a little back armor piece that houses some magnets for the removable jetpack, and this jetpack was actually scratch-built using various Lego pieces and some third-party accessories. And I did make some functions with the thrusters that allowed them to rotate, since the bar it's connected to is going through a flex tube, so that should be able to move. But I think some paint got stuck in there, or some sealant got stuck in there, and made this thing immovable, which I'm bummed about because I was really happy with that little function there. But you know, it's whatever. It's still, at least it got stuck in the right position, right? But anyway, the helmet was probably the most fun part about this guy, since I just love the overall design of that helmet model. I started with a Lego Mando helmet as a base, and then I dremeled out the cheeks, so I made that whole cheek area flat, and then I carved out the visor and drilled some holes in the side of the helmet so I could plug the Clone Army Customs antenna pieces in there, and then I cleaned it up by sculpting in some areas like the ear bits, making that circular, the rim around the visor, and then sculpting over the brow line so it's completely flat there, and then making the rim around the visor also sharp instead of curved. So I really like how that turned out. After that, I just painted it up in some various grays. I used some green for the cheeks, and then some tan for the Clan Vizsla symbol right on the center of his helmet. Now, there is some functionality with that helmet, being that the antenna can rotate, since they're just pegged in, just like the Clone Army Customs helmet, so they're not glued there. But, you know, I've seen them do that in certain cosplays, so I figured that would be a little cool feature to have there. Now, some of you may have seen this, but I did get the helmet sculpt casted by a guy named Forge510, as well as a male Mando torso, so expect those to be available soon for purchase from you guys. I'll let you guys know more about that once I get some stock in. But anyway, underneath that helmet, there is a painted head that was done to resemble a more realistic pre-Vizsla. In terms of accessories, I painted up a Brick Arms Westar 35 pistol and a Aerolite Darksaber, and I'm really happy with that Darksaber. I think it looks really cool. I think the blade is really nice with all the little wisps in there in the white color, and then I did have to shorten the actual hilt section because Aerolite made it stupid long for some reason, so I shortened that a little bit, which I think looks really nice. Now here's a look at that with Maul, since I know some of you guys would want to see that. But for some other comparison, here is my new Vizsla with my old version that I made back in 2014. Definitely some improvement there. And the last figure I have is Bo-Katan. Now, Bo-Katan has two major appearances in the Clone Wars, and I decided to go for her more recent Season 7 armor design, since that one has the additional paint on the helmet and the brown leather on the legs. But even though that specific version of her armor doesn't fit in with this specific group of characters here, part of the Takeover of Mandalore storyline, no, it doesn't fit in exactly. I still like this version a lot more in terms of her armor design, and I wanted to do that even though it's not entirely accurate to this group of figures. But, you know, I just liked it a lot more, so that's why I did it. Now, like Vizsla, I had to sculpt all of her armor, so here's a look at that raw sculpt. I also did get her torso and arms, as well as her helmet casted, so those should be available soon for purchase. Just keep up to date with the community tab here on YouTube. Follow my Instagram. I'll update both of those whenever I hear more progress on the status of whenever you guys will be able to buy these casts. Now, focusing on the legs, I painted all of the armor with some steel, added a light blue stripe, weathered it up, and also added that brown leather that I was talking about with the straps that wrap around the thigh plates. Moving up to the torso, I had to curve the sides in a little bit to make it look a little more feminine, and then I sculpted the armor on top, which looks pretty good. Everything was painted up, and I added the belt using some cloth and vinyl. Also added on some pouches on there as well, and painted it up in brown, and then outlined it, which looks pretty good. The arms have the shoulders and the gauntlets sculpted on, and those were then painted up. There's some buttons and guns on the gauntlets that were painted, and the shoulders have the night owl symbols painted onto both of them. The back side is the same deal with Vizsla, with the armor plate back there that's housing a magnet that allows the jetpack to be removable if you really wanted to. But, you know, this jetpack is fairly simple. It's just a Clone Army Customs one that's just painted up. Decided to do that instead of scratch building it because this mold was just perfect for what I needed it for. Now, the helmet on her was the most fun part to do. I started off with a normal Lego Mando helmet, and I was honestly dreading having to do her helmet at first because I was like, how am I going to carve that night owl design in there, or that female Mando design where the visor's curved and everything? I was like, how the hell am I going to do that? And then I just said, big brain moment, let's take a Dremel and just Dremel off the whole front of the whole front of the helmet so it's just one even smooth layer, and then I can just resculpt it from there. So I was able to resculpt the visor, resculpt the brow line, so there's none of it. It was just completely smooth. I was able to resculpt the cheeks in, so there's that nice little bevel or that dip there, and then it extends out at the bottom. So I think that turned out pretty nice. I also had to sculpt the sides of the helmet and a little bit on the back side, but made sure that there was a pinhole on one side for the rangefinder so that can still move. It's still compatible with Clone Army Customs and Lego rangefinders. Now, the helmet was a little tricky to paint since white paint is usually a bitch to work with, but I think it turned out fairly smooth. And then on top of that, I painted all of the owl markings and the Clan Kryze logo. Overall, I'm just really, really happy with how the helmet on her turned out, considering I was dreading having to do it. I think sculpting it was a good move, and I can't wait for some of you to get a hold of this in hand if you guys are interested in buying some casts, because I don't really think there's a good version of a night owl or just a female Mandalorian helmet out there. So this just opens the gateway for a whole bunch of people being able to make good Bo-Katan customs or good night owl customs. You could even use it for Sabine, everything. But even though I'm just so happy with that helmet sculpt and that helmet paint job, I still do have an unmasked head for her, which I think turned out equally as good. I painted the face up and sculpted a custom hairpiece using a Spalco hairpiece as a base, and I think that really turned out damn nice. I was really, really happy with how that turned out. So I honestly don't know how I'm going to have her displayed, with the helmet on or the hair on. Who knows? Lastly, she's armed with 2 West Star 35 blasters, but here she is with the dark sabers too, since she gets that in Rebels. For comparison, here she is with the bow that I made in 2014. And honestly, the 2014 version still holds up. That one was always one of my favorites that I made, and I just still think the paint job kind of holds up. Sure, there's room for improvement, but it was 6 years ago, and I'm still pretty proud of that figure. And then here she is with Pre-Vizsla for our little Death Watch gang. And then here she is with the Season 7 version of Maul. All right, guys, that is pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, I am just extremely proud of how these guys turned out. They turned out exactly the way I envisioned it, and I could not be happier with how they turned out, but I would love to hear what you guys think of them. If you guys have any other suggestions for more Clone Wars figures, I would love to hear it. But please, also, I would really, really appreciate if you guys would share this video around on social media and everything. I would just worked so hard on these guys to make them as good as I possibly could, and I also worked really hard in that stop motion at the beginning. I took about a week to shoot a minute and a half worth of stop motion stuff. I'm no Force Fire 101. That stuff is still a little bit choppy, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I think it's something unique to have in there. So, I'd really appreciate it if you guys could share that around. I'd love that. But remember, I'll have some casts of the Mando armor you guys saw in this video available soon. So if you guys are interested in buying some of that to make your own custom Mandos, I'll have that available soon, as well as some other Mando-related armor sculpts and everything. So stay tuned for that again on the community tab and on my Instagram. More Clone Wars figures are coming soon. Part 3 is going to have Gar Saxon, ARC Trooper Jesse, Ahsoka, Captain Vaughn, and a 332nd Trooper. So that should be a good group of figures. However, I'm going to take a little break from Star Wars because I want to make some Halo Reach figures since that 10-year anniversary of that game's coming out soon. And I also did have a pretty big video back in the day of Halo Reach, so it's kind of to commemorate that. But anyway, that'll be coming out shortly, hopefully, if I get those figures done soon. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. That's going to be it for this video, and I will see you guys later.